Dave Ramsey recently called me a liar on his show.
I have $25 million in mortgages and he's got a baby on his hip. That guy's so lying. That is not true.
Dave Ramsey is known as the no debt guy. He tells you not to get into debt, save cash, live frugally, retire at 65. I am known as the get into debt guy, create wealth quickly and retire in the next 5 years. So we have different paths, different plans, nothing's wrong with either. Some people like what I teach, some people like what he teaches. And that's fine, it's okay to disagree, but when you call somebody out and call them a liar, you give me the opportunity and the responsibility to reply.
Not even one that said I became a millionaire because I maximized the leverage on my personal residence and put that money in mutual funds. Not one!
Well, no I don't know anybody that's done that either. I bet if I did a study saying how many millionaires stood on their head, picked their nose, and became millionaires, that would be zero also. That study was a waste of money because nobody does it that way. I'm in $25 million worth of debt and that allows me to own $45 million worth of real estate. So there's $20 million in equity that I would not have if I was not in debt. More on that later in the video when I explain where Dave doesn't understand what I do. But the point is this study that he did was a waste because it's so caveated. Some people borrow against their personal residence to maybe invest or to buy more real estate or to do something along those lines, but nobody borrows money against their house and invests in mutual funds. That's stupid. You're borrowing money and paying interest on that and then investing in mutual funds. That's like a backwards way to do it. But people do borrow against their house to invest in real estate. They do borrow against their house to invest in businesses or other things like that. So we can move on from that part. I just wanted to point out that that is an extremely caveated, if that's a word, study that doesn't even really make sense. And you can't generalize that across all people that borrow money because most people borrow money from other investors or other lending sources, not their personal residence. I know a lot of people that borrow money against their rental properties, but again, not their personal residence. That was a caveat that made that study null and void.
The millionaire guy on TikTok told me differently, Dave.
Well, that's because not all those people tell the truth.
Well, he had an online course that was going to show me how to do it.
I know, for $3,000.
Oh, that's how he made his money, not through leveraging debt. That makes sense.
Well, I did make my money through leveraging debt and through buying real estate. Now, I do have an online course that I rarely tell people about. It's not really an online course, it's a mentorship. And in the last 16 months, it's garnered 1,100 students that own $200 million worth of real estate because of that mentorship. So you don't really know how I make my money. I make a lot of my money in rental properties. I make a lot of my money flipping houses and wholesaling houses, done over 1,000 houses in the past 8 years. And I also do make money from my mentorship. But what my mentorship does do is it teaches other people how to create wealth. If you want to live the Dave Ramsey plan, which I'm going to get into here in a minute, you can live frugally and retire 65. If you want to get creative and leverage debt like Elon Musk, like Jeff Bezos, like all these billionaires and multi-billionaires that are worth 100 times more than Dave, they do it by borrowing money to properly leverage debt. Now, they may not have done that against their personal house, Dave, but they have done that to grow their businesses. And I take what they do and take that and do that with houses because I'm not as smart as any of those guys, so I could not create a business or tech company from borrowing money, but I can create a lot of wealth very quickly by borrowing money to buy real estate.
That's why we put stuff on TikTok. I mean, I was going to avoid TikTok. That whole thing drives me nuts. And we just started flooding it with Ramsey stuff to try to flush out some of the sewage. Yeah, just flush out some of the sewage.
Let's talk about what he's doing right here. He's saying that his way is the only way, that everything on TikTok is garbage. Anybody else that preaches any other way of investing is sewage, and he is clean water. He is the clean way, the only way, the best way. That's scary, that's dangerous, and that's very echo chamberish. If you don't know what an echo chamber is, it's when you discard anybody's opinion other than yours and only surround yourself with yes men and yes women who agree with what you agree with. That is not what makes this country beautiful. That is not what has created this country. You need opposing sides. You need Democrats. You need Republicans. You need opposing sides, and you need to look at other people's point of view. If you don't, a lot of scary things happen.
I have $25 million in mortgages, and he's got a baby on his hip.
Oh, you've seen that one. Yeah, that one went viral.
Yeah, that one's just so... That guy's so lying. That is not true. You just watch it. Watch his eyes. Watch his mouth. I mean, the guy's just... You don't have to be a FBI trained to figure out this guy's not telling the truth, okay? So it's just a straight up lie.
He's calling me a character, calling me a straight up liar, talking about FBI and body language. I don't even understand what he's talking about in this part. I have created multiple videos on all social media platforms that walk through my properties that I have purchased. I've shown spreadsheets that show my debt and my equity and my cash flow. I have tens of thousands of hours of content on social media that's mainly talking about my real estate portfolio. So that study he did, I wasn't pulled in, and he didn't take into account by looking at any of my other videos. Now, before we get to the end of the video, let me explain to you and maybe to Dave how I've created my wealth and how most people create their wealth. If you have a job, most people can only make so much money at that job, therefore they can only save so much money. And if you save your money and pay off your debt, that's fine. That's not a bad way to go about living, but that's not really a way to get ahead. You're living frugally, not really enjoying the finer things in life until you're 65 and probably too old to enjoy it. That wasn't good enough for me, so what I did was I did what the people I mentioned earlier in the videos, these billionaires, have done. You borrow money from other people, not your personal residence, to buy assets. Not talking about getting into bad consumer debt and buying cars you can't afford or houses you can't afford or going on vacations you can't afford. I'm not a proponent of bad debt, but I am a proponent of good debt because that is what creates millionaires and billionaires. Well, assets actually technically create wealth and create millionaires and billionaires. So if you don't have enough money to buy assets, what you do is you borrow money to buy those assets. And then you take the equity and the cash flows assets produce. They're assets, so they produce cash flow. And you take that cash flow and you pay off who you borrowed the money from. Eventually that person or bank or lender is paid off and you own that asset. And guess what assets do if managed properly? They go up in value. That mortgage, that debt that Dave hates, gets paid down by other people. It gets paid down by rent for the most part if you're buying real estate. If you're borrowing money to create a business as an asset, then whatever cash flow you get from the consumers is going to pay off that debt. So it's a way to get ahead without making enough money, because I want more people to create wealth sooner and faster. I don't want a nation of everybody working until they're 65 and 70 and not even really enjoying their life for a majority of it. I want people to enjoy their lives now, and this is a way to do it. If you're borrowing money to leverage something that you can't afford that doesn't produce cash, then of course, I'm not going to tell you to do that. But if you're borrowing money specifically to buy real estate assets, and you manage those assets properly and fill them with good tenants, you will create wealth extremely quickly. That's how I bought over 280 rental properties in the last 8 years. That's how I have that $45 million worth of real estate, because I'm in $25 million worth of debt. And he's talked about in the past how tenants don't always pay rent and the government does this and COVID does that. During COVID, we collected 98% of our rent because we treat our tenants fairly, we're landlords, not slumlords, and we take care of them and communicate with them. So if you do things the right way, it's not a doomsday scenario. Hopefully that was a little lesson for you. There's a ton of videos I have on here and on my podcast, The Faster Freedom Show, that explain how to do this in a lot more detail. But I wanted to at least introduce the concept to you here, and if Dave watches this video, maybe this can teach him a little bit as well.
This data is so freaking solid that if you don't agree with the conclusions, you're what's known as wrong.
Again, speaking in such absolutes, telling people they're wrong, telling people they're liars, I don't really understand where that comes from, because I respect the heck out of Dave Ramsey. I read his book, EntreLeadership. I have spent tens of thousands of dollars sending my employees to his EntreLeadership Summit, where he talks about leadership and growing a business. He doesn't do the whole debt is bad thing at that summit, so I respect the heck out of his business and the brain he's built. I just don't appreciate him attacking me, calling me a liar when he has no proof of it. As I've said in the short form content that I've made about this, I will gladly send Dave my mortgages on my $25 million worth of real estate. He can contact me, he can send me a message on Instagram, or somebody from his team can do that, and I will personally send them the mortgage statements of my $25 million in debt. In fact, I will fly down to Nashville to go on his show and talk about it and have a normal debate. If he's gonna call me a liar and call me names, I would prefer not to go, but if he's gonna have a professional grown-up conversation, I know he likes speaking to people like they're babies with his cash flow baby step plan or whatever he calls it. But if he's willing to have an adult conversation and not call people's names and listen to other perspectives, I would love to go on his show. If it's just gonna be a slaughterhouse like it was there, then I'll probably avoid it. I'm saying all this to say, be careful who you listen to on social media, and make sure you're listening to people that are open-minded, that are willing to be agile and take in new information and adapt. There are a lot of different ways to create wealth. Dave's plan is not a way to create wealth, it's a way to live and get out of debt, but there are a ton of other ways to create wealth beyond my concepts. Hopefully you appreciated some perspective and got a kick out of this. Worst case scenario, hopefully it's entertaining for you and maybe you learned a little bit. Oh yeah, if you're interested in that mentorship that Dave Ramsey hammered on, check out the description below. There's a free training, no strings attached, that talks about it, and it also gives you a link to call my team and talk about the mentorship that has over 1,100 students that own over $200 million in real estate. See you on the next one.